I would like us to launch into the questions. But if any of you have questions and want to put the questions to Prof directly, that's also fine. Just use the icon button where you raise your hand, and then I will call you to ask your question. So Prof, there was a question earlier asked, and I predicted that it was more of an academic who would be able to answer this question better. The question reads, should free education be means tested by a capable board at the facility or school level? And then there was a similar question in relation to means testing, and it says, should means testing be used to reduce the cost of tuition to the government and the money saved channeled into improving the facilities and providing better quality of teachers and teaching material? So that was the question. Prof, are you willing to take those two? Then I'll call on Amwaku Nwama, and then there's another person who's using a Galaxy Tab A. We'll pick those two, sir. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I agree entirely with the person, or I believe strongly that means testing is I did mention that we need to target people, and the most appropriate way of targeting is doing a means test. So I don't have, but I also know that means tests can be very difficult and sometimes impractical. And so you've got to find ways of seeing what works best in our environment. One of the suggestions I've heard made by many different people is that instead of making SHS free for everybody, why don't you identify schools that will be free and identify schools that will not be free? So every parent knows that if I take my son or daughter to this school, it is free. If I take my son or daughter to that school, it is not free. So I have a choice. And then you create, even in those schools that are not free, you create the possibility through scholarships. That's what scholarships are meant for. You use scholarships to allow people who are not financially solid or financially sound to compete for slots in those areas. You know, for me, it is important that we are able to use the school system to pull everybody up, whether they are poor or non-poor. We are able to use the school system to bring them up gently. Today, what I see is like bringing everybody down to a particular level. It's like well, if we all cannot get to the top, let us bring everybody down. That's confirmed by the comments quite recently attributed to the Minister of Education when he spoke about West Legals and pre-sec admissions and so on. So it's important that we identify how best to assist the poor, as opposed to using or hiding behind free SHS and access equitability to bring down the entire system. So yes, means testing, but means testing can be done in many different ways.
Thank you very much, Prof. So Mr. Amwaku Nwama or Madam Amwaku Nwama, please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much. Mine is not a question, it's a comment, and I'll try not to make it too long. Excellent, Prof. Aryeetey. As usual, nothing to be surprised about. Thank you very much. Your analysis, almost like you can't add anything else. But I need to say that all of us Ghanaians, we need to be more honest. We need to be more sincere with each other. Having been at the Ministry of Education and observing what happens there and afterwards, the ministry and GES must not think that they have the right to determine what is okay for all of us in Ghana as far as education is concerned. It is for everybody in Ghana to contribute. So we should stop politicizing doing partisanship with our educational system and for our children's sake and for our grandchildren's sake. What used to be okay for access and quality may not be so much so now because of the numbers that we are dealing with, because of the population increase and all that. So let us be more sincere and honest with all of ourselves. Supervision and monitoring is something that ought to be really improved. I think I'll be talking too long, so thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Christine Amwako Nywama. Thank you very much for your contribution. And for those who may not know her, she's a former Minister for Science, Environment, and a former presidential advisor as well. And she was one person I was walking behind a staircase once. She wasn't holding the railings and I was, and she warned me that there's a lot of bacteria on railings. So when I'm walking up the stairs, I should avoid holding them. So that's my memory of her. Nice to connect with you again, Dr. Amwako Nywama. Thank you. Now we have other questions who want to, those who've raised their hands, but I can't see any names. So I will have to ask, there's one person who's joined with a Galaxy Tab A, there's no name. If you can ask your question, then the other person has joined with the Galaxy A03S. So I'll start with Galaxy Tab A. Please introduce yourself and then you can contribute.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm grateful. My name is Albert Bavi, speaking from the Oti region. I would like, first of all, to thank Prof for that wonderful and insightful presentation. My question are these. One, may I know if this program or this presentation is going to get to the authorities who are in charge of our educational system and how it's going to influence their decisions they are making? Because I think things of this nature should get to them for them to know that there are real works that need to be done. So how will this program reach them and how will it have some influence on our system? Because if it is ending here only, then I think we will not be going far or be doing more work or impact on the system. So that's my first question. Two, as Prof rightly said,
let me just quickly answer that, sir. So the Center for Social Justice will compile the issues and the recommendations and will put it in a position paper and present it to the ministry. So that's how it will get to them, sir. Thank you. You may continue.
Thank you very much. It's a prayer fervently that they really take it into consideration, because a lot of suggestions are going, but they feel they are the only people who know a lot or have the expertise to run the educational system. So whenever things are brought to their attention, they just brush it off and they continue with the normal thing. And our systems are going down and down. We are sinking every now and then. The region I'm talking about, that I am coming from, my school in particular, our students complete every year, and about only 20% can even read and write from the senior high school. Meanwhile, they are always touting the program that it's a flagship program, it's turning out a greater number. Meanwhile, the quality is being watered down. Students cannot read and write at the end of a second cycle institution. So what are we doing? On that same campus I am teaching, the UDS is running a distance program, and most of these people who cannot read and write are doing such a program. So at the end of the day, they are pushed into the system back to train whose children, and what do we get? In fact, our hearts are bleeding for Mother Ghana in terms of education. And I don't know how we can really have these things solved. Thank you very much. I'm grateful.
Thank you very much, sir. Let's also call on Godfred Asante, who has his hand up. Godfred, you can ask your question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I've joined this session from UK, the United Kingdom, and I'm very passionate about education as an educationist. I'm a lecturer at the Coventry University. I have been a product of Ghana Educational Services. I went through the old system that is known as Saito, from primary through middle school, up to the university. And then before I came to the UK for my postgraduate degree, and then I've been in the system, and then now lecturing at the uni. I was listening to Prof. Aryeetey with keen interest and how education or the Ghana education has evolved over the years. What I have observed and noticed is that the Ghana educational system seems to be politicized in the sense that our governments, I don't know, probably for votes or for the sake of political interest, tend to tamper with the educational system without necessarily taking into consideration how important and then how the system will actually impact on the development of the economy and then the individuals per se. There's one thing I want to find out, whether the people, in terms of when I say the people, I'm talking about the stakeholders of education in Ghana, have actually taken into consideration the cost of this new free SHS system and how the running of it may also be impacting on the quality of education in Ghana. Because what I've noticed is that here in the UK, education, up to the higher education level or the high school level is free. But it's only free, at the point of day when you attend a day school that is, going to school from home. If you want to go to boarding school, you have to pay. You have to pay for your feeding, and you have to pay for everything to do the education. It is the tuition that is free. I sometimes wonder and how sustainable it's going to be for the Ghanaian government to continuously fund education from the primary up to the high school level, at a point of sponsoring even their feeding, the boarding, and everything. I don't see this to be sustainable. And I want, the panel to please help us in this, as to whether there's something that, the stakeholders or the government need to face the reality on the ground, as to the possibility of making this sustainable. I think I'll rest my point. I've got other issues that I wanted to raise, but I'll give room for others to continue. But how is this going to be sustainable? That's my question. And then what is it that we are doing as stakeholders to help the government, to come to the reality that this isn't going to be sustainable? Because even in developed countries, in the US, in the UK, you hardly get, boarding schools being free. It is absolutely unsustainable. Thank you very much. Sorry, I think you're muted. I don't know if it's for me.
Yes, I am. Thank you. So I was saying that we'll now take your answers, Professor Aryeetey. We have some questions in the chat box. I'll come to that after you're done with your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Godfrey's question basically was whether the free SHS involving largely a boarding system for students was sustainable. it depends on how you choose to look at sustainable. If you have no problem with the compromises that we've already made in terms of the quality, yes, you can keep it there and call it sustainable because you're able to keep the kids at school for 2 terms or 2 semesters, and then you are happy. That's fine. But by all means, it will come at a huge cost. The huge cost being the quality, and that is where the problem is. I agree with you that there's nowhere that you find kids in a boarding school for free. Nowhere in the world, except in Ghana, and you find kids in a boarding school for free. Because nobody can afford it. The whole world cannot afford it. So you got to find a way. We've got to find a way of determining who benefits from free education and who does not. And one of the things that you can do is say that the free provision should not extend to boarding schools. And if boarding schools are going to be not free, then there has to be a way of paying for those who cannot afford it. And there are many different ways of providing support to those who cannot afford it. That's where the means testing comes in and so on. By all means, nobody should be left behind. But you don't pursue nobody being left behind by bringing the entire system down. And that's what we seem to be doing here.
There's some questions here. Let me just read them. And there was a question from the gentleman from the OT region. He had some concerns about, the investments made, the output, and the fact that still we have not very good quality still going into tertiary education and still coming out into the world of work. Hello, Prof.
Yes.
Yeah, I was asking about the question from the OT region. I think you missed that. The gentleman was concerned about the quality of.
I thought it was a comment.
Okay, more of a comment.
Yeah, it was more of a comment, which I agreed with. I mean, there's enough evidence. One of the things that we need to do is begin to do a careful, properly structured study of these things. We've heard Ruby's story today. There are many other stories. There are many different experiences that need to be documented. And once we begin to document these things, the evidence for change will be far too strong to ignore. And I think I will encourage CSJ to pursue a documentation of these experiences that we are sharing today and from many other places. We should encourage the academics or researchers who work in education to look into what it takes. There are many things that we've talked about today that require solid research in order to answer questions that will provide evidence for policy change.
Thank you, Prof. So there's some questions. This one from Samson says, the PTA contribution should be seriously reconsidered. It has stifled the less endowed schools. It has to be a policy reorientation. I served on a school board and know this firsthand. There's a question here from Jane. Says, why isn't there a cap on the student population in the school? This is very serious. Prof, is that something that's achievable? A cap on student population when we're trying to follow the policy of giving access?
Yeah, I understand Jane's question perfectly, and I have sympathy for putting caps. I mean, the only reason why you're not going to put caps is that you are far less concerned about the quality than you are about creating access. So in a situation where making sure that you can count a growing number of kids in school is more important than showing that the kids' performance is on the rise. Putting a cap would not be politically expedient. So that's why it's not going to happen. Schools are being forced to take in thousands of students every year. When we know that the resources of this, I mean, you look at the boarding house space, you know that that school cannot have more than 2,000 kids, and yet you force 4,000 kids into their school. You know that classrooms that you have cannot contain more than 2,000, and yet you have put 4,000 kids in the school. It is not the schools that are deciding on how many kids they want. It is the GES that determines that. So, and
all right.
it's not, so the GES is not going to put a cap.
Okay, this sounds more like a comment. It says the quality of Ghanaian education will suffer greatly if urgent action isn't taken to give students enough contact hours. Let's not play politics with the education of our students. This one asks, please, how can we stamp out exam leakages and cheating in examinations in Ghana? I don't know how we got here as a nation. Well, I'm not sure if that's part of the main discussion, but Prof, is that a major challenge in the current dispensation?
Exam malpractice has been with us for many, many, many years. It happens largely because of a breakdown in the governance system. It happens because there's a lot of corruption. It happens because the education system is our passing examination. It's not about properly being educated. And in that system, you do anything to pass your exams. It becomes a lot easier when it's difficult to govern or run a school. And when you lost control over your teachers, when you've lost control over the kids, yes, it becomes easier. So until you get to a point where you've taken away the incentive, you've taken away the incentive to cheat, you've taken away the incentive to be corrupt, I'm afraid we're going to be dealing with that.
Thank you, Prof. So just to let everyone know that we've now been joined as well by Ruby Charlene Opoku. We'll hear from her shortly, but two people have had their hands up, so I'd like to give them a chance to answer to ask their questions. Jane Ogunro and Engineer Vince are on. I'll start with Jane. Jane, please go ahead with your question, and then Engineer Vince can go ahead as well.
Thank you very much. I'm actually Akara Jane Chapman Yahoo. That's my maiden name. So my question here is, what influence/stranglehold does the GES controllers have on private schools? Perhaps we should have many more private schools like GES Lincoln, but affordable with high standards. So I'm thinking more or imagining more in terms of like a franchise of private schools, with high standards, but affordable. And because they're private, they are in control and also have access to funding by having a team of people who go out expressly into the world looking for the kind of finances or financing that would help maintain that level or standard of education, which is so much desired. So I'm just wondering, I'm being very, I tend to be very innovative. So it's like, okay, can we be creative and maybe have, you know, these private affordable schools?
All right. Engineer Vince, please ask your question. Thank you. Hello, Engineer Vince, have you gone offline? Okay, if anyone else wants to ask a question, please, you may do so now before I go to the other questions.
Yes, my question was addressed to Professor Aryeetey.
Yes, he'll answer it. I just want to take like 2 or 3, and then he can answer all at a stretch. So I just wanted to know if there was anyone else. If there isn't, then I can let him answer then. Okay, Prof, I think you can answer Accra Jane Chapman.
Yeah, let me answer Jane's question here. Again, there's nothing wrong with having more private schools in the system. I don't think the private schools should replace the public schools. You need more good schools in the system. So by all means, let us encourage the competition from the private sector, and I'm all for it. I know where you're coming from when you talk about a franchise. I've heard many people talk about the need to privatize some of the schools that we have by inviting private participation and so on, and bringing some private capital. And that is something that is worth considering. There's one thing though that I would like to see, with the way we are managing the school system today, where we decide, when I say we, I'm talking about the Ghana Education Service and the Ministry of Education deciding that when you go to some type of schools, you are no longer eligible to go to what they call the grade A schools. What is going to happen is there will be many new SOSs, TISs, GISs created. There'll be many of them coming up. And they'll be coming up because there'll be a demand for their type of education by the middle class. So the kids that would have gone to Wesley Girls or Infantsipim or at Chimota School or Presec or whatever will instead be going to these new private schools. The Achimotas and the Presecs and the Adisados and so on will be completely taken over by a completely different set. What is going to happen then is a new class war where you have the private versus the public. A new class war where if you are at the University of Ghana, you make rules that make it difficult for students who have gone to private schools to enter, because you must fill the place with the kids that you put through secondary school for free. And so then what happens? You will have a new type of Ashesi University come up, and many more of them to take care of the kids going to the private schools. That is going to lead to a future where your status is determined whether you went to a private school or you went to a public school. A time will come when if you didn't go to a private school here, then you went to school abroad. You went to school in the US, or you went to school in the UK or somewhere. That's going to happen. And then when that happens, you find that many of our institutions will be hiring people depending on whether they had the education overseas or not. That is how class wars begin. And I do hope that we can fix the problem here without necessarily beginning that class war. I am all for private involvement in a place like in some of our grade A schools. I'm all for it, but I don't believe that we are ready for privatizing them yet. I believe that we are in a position where we can bring private capital in there, making parents pay, bringing investors in who are assured of returns and so on. Yes, I'm all for that. But I don't want to see a future where every school is like SOS, or every school is like GIS, or every school is like TIS.
Okay, I hadn't even thought about it from the perspective of it creating class wars, right? Because my focus was more on this enabling by making the fees, affordable, or being very creative about the fees, enabling even the lower income people to go to get a quality education, you see. Mm-hmm. So,
I understand you perfectly.
Scholarships, right? Yeah. By giving lots of scholarships. Yeah. So it's not as if we're creating a class war. That doesn't even come on my agenda. I wasn't even thinking of class wars and the possibility of it creating class wars. But for me, to be able to reach those children who cannot afford, the education at that price, but still be able to give them the high standard quality education that the GIS is. So in fact, I guess my quote unquote franchise would rather be competing with the GISs and the Lincolns. You know, they may be angry because this woman is now able to give the same quality education as we. However, she's able to attract people who cannot afford our fees, if you see what I mean.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. I understand it perfectly. I mean,
Prof, maybe you are even late to the party on the class wars, because I can tell you that it has certainly begun. There are many who are critical of political leaders or senior accomplished people because they can afford to take their children to some of these private schools. I'm told in the University of Ghana, if you go to any of these schools, if you come to the University of Ghana, you pay as a foreign student. And the question is, we're also being unfair to such individuals because you're keeping them out deliberately so. And then apart from that, there are many middle-class people who are opting out of a system they don't believe in, even though they can't afford it. They are borrowing to put their kids through these schools. So it's actually begun that much.
There's no doubt in my mind that, and it could get worse. If you look at my presentation, I spoke about the need for private participation.
Yes.
So I'm all for it. All I'm saying is we've got to be very careful in the way we do it, so it does not lead to the class war. We've got to be careful. Yeah. So I want us as a nation to be able to develop a very, very competitive school system, one in which you have choice. You choose whether you're going to a public school or you're going to a private school. It's a choice you make. And in making that choice, you are looking at what is on offer. And then you are not forced into a system simply because that's the only thing available. You know, I want to see a school system in which choice is very, very much available, and the system is such that it pulls up everybody, rich or poor. It pulls up everybody. If we are not careful, it pulls everybody down, and those who don't want to be pulled down then opt out. When they opt out, what they pick would then lead to the class war.
All right, let's take Mr. Bennett, who's had his hand up. Mr. Bennett, please, can you ask your question? Thank you. Mr. Bennett, are you on with us? I saw your hand up. All right, so yeah, go ahead.
Hello. Oh, sorry, I lost the connection for a moment. So my name is Yao Bennett Amponsa, and I serve on the OA, on the academic subcommittee of the OA. There are things, of all the things that we've discussed, there are things that could be done in the short term, and I know Prof. Aryeetey touched on the governance issues. Right now, the GES is both the regulator of basic education in Ghana and also the operator. So essentially, the GES is marking its own script. If the school boards and management were to be empowered to actually run the schools, then the GES could focus on being the regulator, setting standards, compliance, inspections, stuff like that. And we should see an immediate improvement in the performance of schools if we are able to set up such an accountable system. In the medium term, we could then do the means testing. Or in fact, it's more urgent than that, and I think it's simpler to do. Currently in Ghana, the welfare system that we have, LEAP, is based on means testing. Even the SNIT loans that tertiary students get, especially based on means testing. So it's not an alien concept. And you can build an economic profile of any adult Ghanaian by looking at mining the government's own databases, right? Looking at a combination of databases, tax records, NHIS, land title registry, DVLA, Ghana card. If you take all of these databases, you're going to find every adult Ghanaian in at least 3 or 4 of them and build a reasonable economic profile of that person and judge whether a child coming out of that household deserves scholarship or not. So we make it seem like it's some difficult, unattainable process, but it shouldn't be.
Thank you very much.
Having said that,
okay, sorry,
in the short term, let's deal with the governance issues. If that should be something that we can deal with very quickly, and then we can deal with the economic issues as well in terms of the financing of education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yalbene, for that. Please note that there's a survey monkey that has been put into the chat box. Please take a bit of time to fill it in. It will give us a view about the program, what worked well for you, what can be improved, and anything or any other suggestion you would like to provide. So we are in the last embers of this discussion, but we have some messages. So let me read them. Someone asked, moderator, can the recording of the session be shared with those interested? If this is possible, please share to my email, which the person provides. So the CSJ team will make the link available to each and every one of us so that we can watch the session again on our down time. And so that's what will be done. Let me see, I think I saw 1 or 2 questions. Okay, then this one says, great presentation. I joined a bit late, but the little I heard is profound. Prof stated that, quote, the decline in education quality did not begin with free SHS, but free SHS will make it worse. This is a profound comment, but I'm wondering how giving education access to a lot more people, especially poor people, will lead to a decline in quality. Is the problem with the free SHS of that quality, or is about the sustainable funding? Yes, Prof, if you can answer that.
It's about the many kids in the schools not having access to what they need in order to be able to perform at the right level. So putting them in the school is a good thing, but not giving them the right type of education cannot be in their interest. There are some who tell you that giving people bad education is probably worse for them than no education. I'm not the way we stand on that one, but clearly, if we can increase the numbers and improve on the quality, that's what we should be aiming for. But where increasing the numbers comes only at the cost of quality, we should be careful.
Thank you, Prof. So let me call on Ruby Charlene. Ruby, we watched your video earlier on. We're told that you'll be joining much later. I'm sure you've had an opportunity to hear what's been said so far and some of the comments in the chat box. I think your experience resonated for many who are concerned about the numbers, concerned about the erratic nature of the school calendar, concerned about the limited infrastructure and the opportunities therein for students to do well. Is there anything more you would like to leave us with? Hello, Charlene. Hello, Charlene.
Hello.
Yes, yeah, go ahead. Yes, hello, Charlene. Ruby? Okay, looks like we're not able to connect properly with Ruby Charlene. So I'll ask. Okay, are you ready now?
Yes, please.
Are you ready now?
Yes, please.
I asked, you were supposed to have joined us earlier. You've heard a lot of all's been said. Is there anything else you would like to say before we wrap up the session?
I hope that in the policy paper that will be sent to the government, they encourage them once again to take into consideration the quality aspect of their free SHS policy, because it really needs to be reviewed and quality needs to be restored, because the free SHS policy as at now, it's very terrible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlene. And Prof, just one final comment. The problems persist because of the unwillingness of the decision makers to engage with divergent opinions. If you're not saying an unqualified yes to their policies, they don't want to hear from you. So thank you very much to everyone that sent a message, or those of you who asked your questions directly. Many thanks to you, Professor Aryeetey, for that very insightful presentation based on data and research. Much appreciated, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right.